Today on TimesCast, thousands march to the Egyptian parliament.
It just shows that the momentum is there. It's not just people sitting in the square. There's still the desire for this regime to go.
An emotional TV interview inspires more protesters. And WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is in court again.
A process like this surely lets you understand who your friends are.
I'm standing in front of the Egyptian parliament building in Cairo. The protesters that have been camped out in Tahrir Square, hundreds and thousands of them, have for the first time today branched out. They decided to send a group of a few thousand here to demonstrate in front of the parliament building, calling for its dissolution.
The parliament building is a very empty symbol. The elections were completely fraudulent and the parliament doesn't represent the people's votes at all.
The government of Egypt, over the last few days, has been trying to say, look, the protesters are in Tahrir Square, but the government's going to go on, life can go on around them, we can just ignore them. So the protesters are now pushing back and they're saying, actually, we've got the discipline to send some of our troops, some of our number, to different locations around the city. We can deploy at will, and we're going to expand, stretch Tahrir to the parliament, and occupy more and more of Cairo until we get what we want, the resignation of President Hosni Mubarak.
Mona El Nagar has the scene from Tahrir Square where protesters have found a new energy.
I was in Tahrir Square today, and it was more packed than I have ever seen it. A lot of families were coming, more women than usual, and children. And a lot of people said it was their first time there.
بعد حلقة وائل غنيم امبارح خرجت وأنا وأخواتي وكلنا.
One of the reasons was the release of Wael Ghanem, a young man who works for Google, and he was one of the main organizers behind the protests.
دي ثورة شباب الإنترنت، دي ثورة شباب الإنترنت اللي بقت بعد كده ثورة شباب مصر، اللي بعد كده بقت ثورة كل مصر، ومفيش بطل فيها، ومفيش واحد هو اللي المفروض ياخد السين.
People are actually planning ahead. I saw one man with a blueprint of Tahrir Square, thinking of how to reorganize the place so that it can accommodate the amount of people coming in and prolong the protests.
الفكرة الأول إن إحنا عايزين ننظم ميدان التحرير. يعني إيه عايزين ننظم ميدان التحرير؟ يعني عايزين نوري الناس اللي بره والناس اللي جوه والناس كل حاجة إن الناس اللي موجودة في ميدان التحرير دي ناس متحضرة.
People in the square are telling me that they feel that President Mubarak is a stubborn man, and that the United States, by not putting enough pressure on him, is actually reinforcing his position. This is why a lot of people feel the need to turn up at the square and show their support for the protests and continue to demand that President Mubarak steps down.
And Julian Assange was in court again on Tuesday fighting extradition to Sweden.
The Julian Assange hearing's second day has just wrapped up. It was kind of a dramatic day in which the Swedish government lawyers picked a lot of holes in Assange's defence argument, but we're going to reconvene on Friday for the closing arguments. Today's proceedings centred on the fact that Swedish prosecutors say they tried to reach Mr Assange for an interview for several weeks after the alleged incidents happened in August. Mr Assange's defence say they didn't. For 5 weeks they heard nothing, and then he was allowed to leave Sweden, and now they've issued this arrest warrant, and the word they keep using is it's disproportional. In court today, the prosecution successfully picked apart the argument, forced one of Mr Assange's lawyers to admit that, in fact, Swedish prosecutors had reached out to him, and the whole arena, as with everything in this case, is somewhat more murky than initially we suspected. A lot of journalists around today noting the fact that Mr Assange is not really talking about WikiLeaks when he comes outside the court and gives his statements.
A process like this surely lets you understand who your friends are.
And some think that's because WikiLeaks itself has apparently been disabled temporarily because several people have defected to start a new site called OpenLeaks, which kind of attempts to avoid this entire circus, attempts to avoid all the media attention on Julian Assange, all the media attention on WikiLeaks, and become kind of a more low-profile, neutral conduit between those who want to leak and those who want to receive leaks. When OpenLeaks launches fully, in summer we'll be seeing a lot more of this kind of what's posited as a battle between OpenLeaks and WikiLeaks for the leaking attention.
Join us again tomorrow for TimesCast.